Week 1 is here, and we are here to rank every single quarterback you need for week 1 in fantasy football. We're going to walk through it tier by tier, from our S tier all the way down to the Fs. I'm joined by the fantastic T-Strack, Tom Strachan of Fantasy Pros. Tom, right at the top, we have got the S tier, the superstar tier. We've got Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jayden Daniels. Why do these guys deserve to be in the tier of their own?
Well, I think it's because they truly have separated as a tier, and it all kind of comes back to the way the NFL's gone now. You need to be able to rush and you need to be able to pass. And whereas in years gone by, you might have been able to poke holes in Lamar, you might have been able to poke holes in some of the other dual threats. There's just no doubt in what we saw from these guys last year. Last year, Lamar had a 72% completion rate in a playoff game. Yes, it didn't go very well, but still, that's the development that we have seen from Lamar. Jayden Daniels was incredible last year. He became one of only 3 quarterbacks through his career at this point to average over 50 rushing yards per game, the other two being Lamar and Justin Fields. So we know that he can get it done with his legs. But what was so impressive was just how great he was under pressure last year. And I think that's going to be a big talking point this week because the Giants' defensive line with Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau, Brian Burns, and Abdul Carter, I do worry slightly about the Commanders, but not enough where I'm going to be moving Jayden Daniels down a tier. And Josh Allen, it just comes back to the simple formula that over the last 2 years in the regular season, he's had 27 rushing touchdowns. It just doesn't matter what you're doing as a passer at that point, but we know that he's a good enough passer. He did struggle against the Ravens in week 4. He had only a 55% completion rate against them, 180 yards, 0 touchdowns. And then in the playoffs, he didn't really do much in the passing game either, but he was getting there in the ground game. So you could try if you wanted to build an argument against any of these guys. But look, if you went out and spent a round 2, round 3 draft pick on these guys, you should not be worried about playing them in week 1.
Absolutely. You draft them for a reason. You got to start your studs. It's worth adding, we're not talking about the Thursday night players. Jalen Hurts would be included here if we were. I'm a little bit lower on Jayden Daniels, as you said. That Giants defense, I think, is going to be really impressive, but still warrants his spot in that elite tier. Moving on to the second tier, our A tier. Kyler Murray, Bo Nix, and then Joe Burrow. For me, I'm incredibly excited about Joe Burrow. I think this Bengals offense is going to be electric. And I think it could be a sneaky shootout with the Browns because it's 2 woeful defenses, let's be honest, and Joe Flacco on the center.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit cooler on Joe Burrow than you. I know you've got him 4th in your rankings. He's 5th in mine, but look, we're kind of picking hairs, like to be worrying about that. The total of this game at 47.5, it did surprise me a little bit. I kind of expected it to be a little bit lower, partly because the Bengals, they never start hot. It's been a point of emphasis for them all off season that they wanted to start hot. And let's face it, they should have been having people sacked last year for the fact they started so poorly. And it's been like the 3rd season in a row where they started poorly. Now, obviously, Jamar Chase had his contract dispute last year, but this year we're not going to have to worry about any of that. And they've played their starters in preseason games. The worry for me is how bad that offensive line looked, against, I think it was the Commanders, where every single Commanders defender was just getting straight through. And now you're coming up against Myles Garrett and Mason Graham. I worry that the Bengals might be put slightly off the kind of rhythm that they'd like to be. And I worry that this is a game where both teams might not drive things quite as high as people are expecting, but he was still a very easy top 5 pick for me this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other 2, Kyler Murray, as we said at the top, rushing production. Are we expecting significant rushing production from him again this year? And then Bo Nix, you can throw him in that same boat as well.
Yeah, I mean, Murray averaged the 6th most rushing yards on quarterbacks last year on the 12th most rushing attempts. So if they decide to put a bit more faith in his legs and let him go free a little bit, then it's easy to see how he could maybe be a bit better with it. The Saints, they allowed 4 quarterbacks over 49 rushing yards last year. We don't expect their defense to be particularly good. So I feel like Kyler Murray can have a decent day on the ground. The concern is just whether they can get Marvin Harrison involved. Can Trey McBride finally catch some touchdowns? If those things happen for Murray, then obviously it's going to be wheels up for him. Bo Nix, again, another quarterback who really helped himself on the ground last year, 430 yards, 4 rushing touchdowns. the Titans defense was one of these units that was kind of sneaky good. And I think a lot of people didn't realize how good they were because the games were so dross and Will Levis was so miserable. But they ranked 8th best in DVOA last year. They did allow the 30th most QB fantasy points as they got worn down because Will Levis wasn't able to sustain a drive. So I'm really interested in how this one plays out. I don't think the Titans defense is going to be as much of a rollover as some people do. I've seen a lot of people saying they think Broncos can win that easily, and I think it'll be tighter than that.
Yeah, we're going to move on to our B tier. But before we do, if you are finding this for the first time, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button. We do weekly ranking shows for every single position, and there's plenty more content to help you win your redraft leagues. In our B tier now, this tier, Justin Fields, Baker Mayfield, Drake Maye, Brock Purdy, Trevor Lawrence. This is interesting because some of these guys could well be sat on your waiver wire in your 1QB leagues. Is there anyone particularly that you're reaching out to grab if they could be available, Tom?
Well, I mean, Justin Fields' upside is massive. Like, we had Matthew Berry on the channel a few weeks back talking about how he couldn't understand why people weren't higher on Justin Fields. And you can poke holes in the passing. It's so easy to, because he only had 10.6 completions per game in Pittsburgh. In 3 of his 4 seasons in the league, he's been below 13.5 completions per game. We've had a lot of people saying that we were too low on Garrett Wilson on some of the videos that we've done this season, and saying that Justin Fields is going to pepper him. Well, maybe he does, but a 30% target share doesn't really count for a lot when you're only completing 10 passes per game. But on the flip side, he does average over 50 rushing yards per game in his 4 seasons. And last year, in the 6 games that he played for the Pittsburgh Steelers, he had 2 multi-rushing touchdowns. I don't think the Steelers are going to be an easy matchup for him this week, but I do think that he's worth rostering at this point in the season. Baker Mayfield, somebody that we've kind of gone back and forth on a little bit at times. I know, again, we had JJ Zacharyson on the channel, and he has taken a very strong stance against Baker Mayfield. I think it's going to be incredibly interesting to see how he starts the season, because there's no denying he ran pure last year. But going out there, nice matchup to start the season. And even though he doesn't have Chris Godwin, he does have Mecca Egbuka. So, yeah, this tier, it's all kind of like, it wouldn't take a lot for me to see them make a sizable jump up. The one guy I'm just a little bit cooler on than yourself is Brock Purdy, because I think the Seahawks defense is going to be really good this year. They were much better across the back half of last year. After week 8, they just kind of turned the switch, and that's been Mike McDonald in both Baltimore and with the Seahawks. And with Juwan Jennings not having practice, Ricky Pearsall having missed time in training camp due to injury, Brandon Ayuk obviously not out there.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm a little bit intrigued just if we see some more rushing from Purdy. You know, as you said, that Seahawks defense is good, but I do think they do tend to struggle against the rushing quarterback. I think Brock Purdy has shown that mobility over the last couple of years, and I think that there is a world where he could get some sneaky rushing yards added in there. Trevor Lawrence, a guy that both of us have ranked inside the top 12. You did a prop line earlier in the year about his touchdown set at 22.5. You felt like you were smashing the over. Travis Hunter's looking like he's going to be an every down player on offense to the start of the year. Is it just wheels up for Trevor Lawrence?
Maybe it's not like full go, but I think that it's enough of an increase where, particularly in this game against the Panthers, who were second to last in EPA allowed per drop back last year, who gave up the 3rd most fantasy points to the quarterback position last year. I think, look, I mean, I hate referencing last year's stats constantly at this point, but some of them are meaningful. The Panthers, they made some additions, but they were expected to go out and spend the 1st round pick on a defender, and they didn't do that. They spent it on a wide receiver, who we'll talk about in our wide receiver video. But I still think that they are there for the taking, and I think that Trevor Lawrence is going to set career highs in touchdowns this year, and I do think that he's going to get off to a strong start, because it all starts with the screen game under Liam Cohen, and that's going to make life easy for him.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see the creative ways in which Liam Cohen can scheme up some manufactured touches for the receivers and the running backs and tight ends in this offense. I think it's going to be Trevor Lawrence's best friend and should hopefully bring some great production out of him. We're going to move on to our C tier. Perhaps we'll call this C for surprising, Tom, because here we find Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert, both of which would have been drafted very highly in your redraft leagues. Tom, we've both got Justin Herbert ranked outside the top 15. I've got him at 15. You've got him at 18. Is this just a case of run first offense, offensive line injuries, and still some question marks on wide receivers outside of Lab McConkey?
Yeah, and you throw in the fact that these two teams are playing in Brazil. Now, obviously, it's the off season up until this game, so we've had more time to prepare and work out how they wanted to do that. But I don't think we should overlook the fact that this game is happening in Brazil and that these are two teams who have pretty good defenses. I mean, last year, the Chiefs, they were really good against the run. They were 11th against the pass in DVOA. They had a habit of like taking the air out of games last year, and that's how they kind of got lucky because they kept things close a lot. So I don't think that this one's going to be as high scoring as perhaps the NFL would really like. Maybe Lad McConkey carries on like he did in the playoffs in that game against the Texans and really gets going. But look, the Chiefs are good against slot receivers as well. Like that's one of their strengths in the passing defense section. So it's just kind of easy for me to say I think that these two quarterbacks are going to be really good through the year. And I expect them to be top 10 guys more often than not. But in this matchup against each other, I don't necessarily think that we see that straight away.
Yeah, absolutely. And then our final three tiers, I'm going to rattle through them here. In our D tier, we've got Bryce Young, Jordan Love, Caleb Williams, Jared Goff, CJ Stroud, Tua, and JJ McCarthy. In our E tier, Daniel Jones, Geno Smith, Matthew Stafford, Michael Penix Jr., Sam Darnold, Joe Flacco, Russell Wilson, Cam Ward. And final, the F tier, Aaron Rodgers and Spencer Rattler. Tom, of those three tiers, is there anyone that particularly stands out that if you're scrambling around, so I'm sure there's teams, it may be week one, but somebody's scrambling out there, who would stand out to you as a sleeper that you would be interested in taking the flyer on?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to play the matchups, then Bryce Young. How much do we see him rush in? Obviously, we mentioned that the Panthers are in a good situation week one. We expect lots of points in that game. I think that the Panthers, they really kind of turned a corner last year, particularly over the back half. I mean, Bryce Young was dead and buried for all intents and purposes. And if it wasn't for that Andy Dalton car crash, would Bryce Young still be a starter in the league? It's difficult to say. But what we saw from him down the stretch was excellent. I mean, from week 10 onwards, he had 4 different games where he rushed for over 20 yards. He was the only quarterback in the NFL with 10 plus touchdowns and 0 interceptions over the final 3 games last year. His EPA went up. His EPA, when pressured, was far better. He just looked much more like the prospect that we thought he could be when he was coming out. So it would be excellent to see him kick on, to see Tero McMillan make a meaningful difference in the passing game. It's a shame that Jalen Coke is going to miss this game. But look, Xavier Legette isn't awful, and Jatavian Sanders is healthy. So I think that they can have a nice game against the Jacksonville defense. But I mean, they're fine, but they're not anything special.
Yeah, absolutely. And then my sleeper, I'm going to throw out Jordan Love. Let's not forget, in 2023, this guy was the QB5 overall. He played nearly all of last year with a multitude of injuries. He's back healthy. He's saying that he's going to be rushing more. All of the receivers are another year older, and then they've spent a first-round pick on a wide receiver. I'm very excited about what this Packers offense could be and what Jordan Love is. And I think if you can go and grab him off a waiver wire in a 1 QB league, I think you're going to be sitting very pretty because I think he's going to have a good week, but particularly a good season. That is it for our QB ranks. If you want to find our running back, wide receiver, or tight end ranks, hit that subscribe button. They will be dropping over the coming days.